If you say that's interesting one more time, I'm going to start thinking I'm not irresistible, Miss Juliet Walsh. And that's a slippery slope. God only knows what effect that will have on my ego. Juli laughed at Zach's absurdity. I'm sorry, but I was trying to listen to Emily. She lied, and Zach snorted. You must have heard the Santangeli lore 10 million times. Admit it, I'm boring you. No, you aren't. I was just thinking. Oh no, you're bad at this, Juli. She fought back another nervous twitch as her muscles tried to turn to see if Rafe was still standing by the wooden table behind her. It was taking so much effort to avoid being aware of him. She was missing everything else. I give up. Zach raised his glass. 24 hours is as much as I put into a lost cause. From now on, we're back to friends, so that means you're free to ignore me. She gave him a sympathetic smile and sipped her wine. It was the Santangeli flagship Chardonnay, and it made her think of sunlight in a secret garden, warm and buzzing with intimacy. She closed her eyes and shouldn't have. The image forming behind her lids was of the Santangeli gardens and the oak tree swing between the honeysuckle and rhododendron bushes. She resisted another stinging urge to turn to Rafe, the desperate call of her body demanding she do something about this. But she couldn't stop her mind from circling back again and again to that earth-shattering kiss, or to his cold reaction to her declared mistake. She was trying to be sensible, but couldn't stop the hope from swelling. And there was no common sense strong enough to calm the fire shooting through her veins at the thought that Rafe was there just steps away from her. A ripple of warmth moved up her spine and she straightened. She didn't know how, but she could feel he was closer. Is their Chardonnay still your favorite? The ripples spread in waves. He sounded a little sulky, like a boy forced to behave indoors when the world outside was full of far more interesting things to do, and it made her smile. She turned, and the moment her eyes met his, everything inside her expanded and softened. I love it. His brow rose, his eyes flashed. The Chardonnay? She added swiftly. They never get it wrong. Taste. She held out her glass, and for a moment it hovered between them. Then his fingers closed on the glass, and she forced herself to let go. But watching him drink was torture in itself. She could almost feel the curve of the glass imprinting on his lip, the cool tingle of wine swirling about his tongue. The memory of that day by the swing was back. He'd brought a bottle of this wine, and she'd sat on the swing just rocking idly, laughing up at him, and then he'd lean down, his lips brushing over. God, she could taste him. She should turn away. She should. I remember this. His voice swept over her skin like a hot shower. I understand why you love it. There was a rumble of talk as Emily finished her presentation and beckoned to everyone to follow. Not yet. She didn't want the moment to break. She didn't want... Too late. Rafe looked away, his fingers combing through his hair. I've just made it through a London winter and a Canadian snowstorm. There's no way I'm going into the vaults when the sun is shining outside. I'll tell Josh I need to work on my best man speech. Rafe handed her the glass, and she was clumsier than he, her fingers sliding over his, and for a moment, the silence between them was stronger than the shuffle and murmur of people moving around them. Better yet, she placed her glass on the table. Come for a walk with me. His gray eyes narrowed, and she didn't know if it was surprise or rejection. But she didn't care. Her mind was made up. Trying to seduce Rafe was probably going to go down in history as her stupidest move ever. Second only to sending him away 10 years ago, that was. But if she didn't try, whatever happened, rejection, humiliation, she would deal with it. The one thing she wasn't worried about anymore was heartbreak. It was far too late to worry about that. Where are you going? Rafe frowned as she unlatched the gate separating the vineyards from the garden. His mind was shot to hell. He was so caught up in knots about her, he hadn't even noticed where they were going. I wanted to go through the walled garden to see. A gust of wind raised her hair in a honeyed cloud, and she pushed it back to see if the swing is still there. It's still there. He hadn't meant to be so abrupt, so he forced a smile. Agatha sent Josh and me there this morning to fetch flowers for some ridiculous Valentine's Day centerpiece. He remembered too late that Valentine's Day wasn't exactly a neutral topic between them, but Juli shrugged it off. Elise always had a thing about Valentine's Day. She's usually quite sensible otherwise. So Josh tells me. I suppose everyone deserves to have a blind spot. God knows I have my fair share. She smiled at him. Fishing Rafe? God, yes, damn her he was. Her smile hurt. It literally hurt, but he couldn't help smiling back. You should know better than anyone. She paused her hands on the gate, ready to open it. I did, once. The mood shifted. There was something intense in her gaze, and it hung over his heart. You know my parents regretted never getting chance to apologize for how they treated you. It wasn't what she'd expected to hear. Hell, it wasn't what he expected to say either. But it came from nowhere. She wet her lips. Really? Really? My mother called and told me. He righted his shoulders against the remembered pain. But it was too late by then. You'd already ended it. I didn't. That wasn't what happened, and you know it. Do I? All I know is I came back from London to have you tell me there's no wedding, no nothing. The pain and the anger was as sharp as if he was still standing in his room, watching her pack, trying to understand how what should have been the most amazing week of his life had turned into a nightmare. Just like that. The gate jerked under her hand, the words tumbling out of her as hot and angry as his. Just like that. Were we living in alternate universes that day? Rafe? You came back from London telling me you'd accepted a job in California, effective immediately. She leaned closer, her eyes flashing with surprising force. You told me to pack because we were leaving right away. To hell with the fact that my degree was the only thing I had in the world that was utterly mine that I built. No, you dismissed everything I had without even asking me. You dismissed me just like my mother, my father, children's services, the foster homes. It was time for Juli to jump again, just because someone was telling her so. She closed her eyes briefly, and he could visibly see her anger being tucked away. He fisted his hands against the need to touch her, too shocked by what she was saying and by a mammoth sense of loss. He'd thought he was offering her the world when all she'd seen was him threatening to take it away. How could he not have realized? How could he not have seen any of that? Not a thing. Just her coldness, as if she was disappointed in him somehow. Just as his parents had been when he'd told them he was marrying a nobody. All he'd seen was coldness. Not the fear or the pain or the need underneath it all. He hadn't seen her at all. The only woman he'd ever loved, and he'd let her down. I'm not blaming you, Rafe, not anymore. She continued more calmly. I knew the job was absolutely right for you, but I couldn't leave the only thing that was mine and be a satellite of yours. You would have hated it as much as I, and then I would have left anyway. I was so very tired of starting again. I was afraid I might not be able to. And I was right, wasn't I? She locked eyes with him. Imagine how much fun you'd have missed out on, shackled to a scared, resentful 21-year-old. Instead, we've made good lives for ourselves. We should be happy. Should be. He held her gaze. Are you happy, Julie? I thought I was. Until I saw you again, Rafe, and realized some things can be put away but never go away. Because it's still here. This happiness that comes from being with someone who, when you fall apart, puts his arms around you and holds you so you don't completely unravel. Or at least unravel just enough so you can put yourself together again, only a little better. A few less knots and tangles. She might not have trusted him at the end, but he was still the only man who ever made her want to unravel. And the only man who'd put his arms around her not only in passion, but compassion. The only man she'd ever wanted to do that to her. And his smile. Back then, she'd almost have to hold herself back from glancing over her shoulder to see if there was some poised and perfect beauty standing behind her who deserved the kind of smile Rafe reserved especially for her. And then his hands would cradle her face, and he'd touch his mouth to hers, and her doubts melted for a while. No, she wasn't happy. Not like that. Not since she'd left him. And she owed him the truth. If it makes you feel better, Rafe, I knew pretty soon running away was a mistake. It took me a while, but I knew I had to talk to you to try and explain. But then Josh shared some photos with the family of a recent trip to San Jose, and there you were in the background of one holding the arm of a stunning brunette. You were smiling. You looked so happy, relaxed, and all I could think was, he's found himself. Her voice wavered, and she tightened her hold on the steel gate, ignoring how the coarse paint bit into her palms. I even felt proud of myself. What greater gift could I give than your freedom to become what you should? He gave a harsh laugh, his hands dragging through his hair to hang off the back of his nape. So you condemned me on the strength of a photograph? I didn't condemn you. Yes, I heard you. You set me free. Points for godlike magnanimity, Julie. I hope you felt very good with yourself. I felt like hell, Rafe. I'm bloody glad you did. You don't know how glad I am to learn you suffered. Because I was in hell too from the moment you left. Every time I tried to find someone to fill that hole, they didn't even come close. You might have walked out of my life, but you were still there like a damn curse. Her hands clenched so tight on the gate, she felt it would crack. She'd never seen Rafe so angry, his fierceness pushing the air out of her lungs. How could she have got it so wrong? I'm so sorry. It was almost inaudible, but he heard her, his eyes softening. No blame, just sadness, regret. So am I, Julie. Beyond the chorus of birds, she could hear the murmur of voices as the party from the winery started to make its way back to the house. Soon, they would have to go back too. But she wasn't ready. Not yet. I guess it proves your point, doesn't it? His hands fell from his neck to tuck into his pockets. We were both too young to be sensible. He didn't say it, but she could hear the corollary, so it was probably all for the best they'd parted. Probably, perhaps it had been for the best. Then. But she wasn't a terrified 21-year-old any longer. And she certainly wasn't ready to write them off again. Come with me. She pushed open the gate and took hold of his hand. It felt so good in hers, so right, its warmth filling her with hope. He had to still feel this. It couldn't only be her. His face was a mask again, but wariness, and something else flickered in his eyes as he looked to her hand in his. Where are we going? There was so much more to that question. I told you, I want to see the swing. It's amazing it's still here. He kept his eyes fixed on the swing because looking at her was proving dangerous, confusing. She'd asked for a truce, told him her kiss had been a mistake, And now she was holding his hand and leading them into a garden with too many memories. What was this? Some things are built to last. She said it softly, like it was loaded with meaning. And was it? He didn't want to give her the power to hurt him again. He'd promised himself he would never be so blind, so weak as he'd once been with her. But here he was, his hopes rocketing out of his control. She gave the rope a little twitch, and it twerked back and forth before settling again, her fingers caressing the frayed hemp, and his hands curled into fists, as if the rasping vibrations were shooting up his own fingers. "Why don't you try it, Rafe?" Against his better judgment, her soft, almost taunting request pulled him forward closer to her and the web she cast around him. "Try it." "The swing? Or are you too grown up for such fun?" She was goading him and taking great delight in it, her teasing smile pushing his restraint. "Try it, Rafe." She lingered on his name, and the muscles along his jaw clenched as he glanced at the clumped knots around the branch. They'd had the same playful argument 11 years ago, and ended up on the grass just a yard away, covered only in his discarded and grass-stained shirt, the dew settling around them, chilling their sweaty bodies as they'd lay exhausted, sated, and aroused all at once, in a way he'd only ever achieved with her. "That branch doesn't look strong enough," he murmured, coming back to the present. "I'll break the damn thing." "You're not that big." "Yes, I am." He laughed as her face suddenly bloomed into color. He remembered that she could be so cool and collected, and then succumb to a blush that would have made a Victorian mama proud. But this time, it faded quickly, leaving just a warm flush across her cheekbones, her eyes sparking with mischief. "Afraid you'll fall flat on your ass." "No." He nudged his chin at her. "You sit." "Coward." Her eyes laughed at him, and he felt his mouth twist further into a smile. "No one calls me a coward and lives." "Coward." This time she drew the word out, and it traveled up his body like an aftershock. "Sit, Rafe. Trust me." "Trust me." He'd tried that once. Hadn't worked. He took a breath and lowered himself onto the wooden seat, his hand closing around the rope just below hers. He'd called her bluff. Time to stand now. But he didn't move captive to the heat that radiated through the scant space between their legs. Every breath brought her scent with it, spreading through him like dye in water jasmine cool and exotic. His gaze settled on the swell of her breasts above the scooped neckline. He remembered what it felt like to peel off the layers between them, how soft her nipples were when she slept, how firm and delectable they became as he coaxed her reluctant but tempestuous passion to the surface. He was on fire. The rope wouldn't break, it would incinerate. "Do I get a prize for doing as I'm told, Juli?" "Not yet. Swing." Her hand slid down an inch, closing over his as she tugged at the rope. Instinctively, he planted his feet more firmly, one hand catching at her waist, and his parted legs instinctively closed around hers as she stepped forward. For a moment, they remained frozen. Then she slowly slid one leg forward, scraping the fabric of his jeans against the inside of his thigh, the frisson stoking the heat, and leaving him pleading as she came to a stop just an inch short of where he needed her. They were fully dressed, doing nothing a couple of teenagers wouldn't do, but he'd never felt so exposed or aroused in his life. He should put her away from him, stand up. At least stop staring at the cleft between the velvet skin of her breasts. Stop imagining, stop remembering that before the fear, resentment, and rejection, there had been this absolute recognition. Juli. His, "Please do something, Rafe. Don't just sit there as if I'm not even here." At least he hadn't pushed her away. Her leg was pressed against his, and his hand was still on her waist. But he looked as cold as ice while she was melting inside. Every step since leaving the winery, she had debated this course of action. She'd half expected him to bring an end to it to walk away, but he hadn't. And now she had him precisely where she wanted him, except that he was just sitting there. She would almost prefer it if he laughed or pushed her away. But saying nothing, doing nothing, she let go of the rope and shifted back. But he came alive, his hand fisting in the fabric of her skirt, his eyes lifting to hers, shocking her. They were blazing with none of the cool dismissal she thought she'd read. They were asking permission, looking to her for direction as he smoothed his hand out and let it travel low and slow, her skin prickling along his path and pleading for more. And then he cupped the back of her knee, pulling her forward to rest it upon his thigh, and her lungs contracted on a rush. She was so close, so near. She could already see he was hard. His body is so hot. He threw his jeans into her. She tried to clamp her legs closed against the surge of pulsing heat, but his hand was there, slipping beneath her skirt, raising it as he pressed closer. He lowered his lashes, his eyes skimming over her, down their trail like a caress upon her skin, until he reached her exposed knee, and she heard his breath catch, still holding her thigh. His thumb stroked at the scar slashed across it, and her throat burned with the sudden agony of loss. The memory she knew was flashing through his mind as well of how he'd once done the same. There'd been such a strange look on his face, and her fragile confidence had almost made her childlike as she'd asked, "I fell out of a tree. Is it very ugly?" "It's beautiful." He'd shaken his head so full of sadness. "I just don't like the thought of you being hurt." Now his thumb traced it again, and he curved his hand under her knee once more, raising her farther up his thigh, unbalancing her. She leaned her hands on his shoulders to steady herself. "It will break," she whispered. The swing, his eyes shot to hers, seared her. "I don't want that to happen. I want this to last." He stood and pulled her against him, his hold so tight it was as though he was saving her from a fall. But she knew it was far too late for her. She'd fallen the moment he took her hand over a decade ago. She breathed him in, filling herself, her breasts pressing against his chest and forcing the words out before she even thought them. "I missed this." "I missed you, Juli." He bowed his head, her name a mere whisper in the breeze, before his mouth brushed over her own gentle coaxing, his tongue tracing her lips, tasting her. And she knew this was what coming home felt like. He tasted warm, familiar, addictive, and she was starved for it, desperate for so much more, and she took it. Took it all. Her body in control now. A decade's worth of longing coming to the fore as she kissed him back with such hunger, a whimper rising through her. "Juli." He tore away, pressing his forehead to hers. "Hell, you could always push me over the edge so damn easily. If we don't stop now." Her voice was fierce as her hands tangled in his hair, holding him to her. "I don't want to stop, Rafe. Please." He shook his head. She could sense his emotions warring against the spiraling lust, but she wouldn't let him back away. She pressed herself tighter to him, felt the urgency of his need between them. "Please, Rafe." He growled low in his throat, his mouth coming back to her, crushing her, absorbing her, his hands feverish upon her skin. God, I missed you, Juli. Tell me you want this. Tell me you want us. I want you, Rafe. I always wanted you. Only you. I want you, Rafe. Always. Only you. Her words whipped through him, his heart pounding in his ears. She took hold of his hand and pulled him to the ground, to the same patch of grass from 11 years before. Make love to me, Rafe. Make love. His heart didn't just pound, it ached. She lay back, her hands hooking around his neck as she gazed up at him. Please. That was when it hit him. He had no protection he hadn't for a second thought planned. We can't. She stilled. Pain filled her depths, and he cupped her face, quick to explain. I don't have anything on me. He settled between her legs, his mouth moving lower, and she shuddered. But I want you, Rafe, all of you. I'm safe, and I'm on the pill. That is, if. He half groaned, half laughed, as his erection surged and pulsed against her. I want to so much, and you can trust me, but are you sure? She nodded, her desperation etched in every line of her exquisite face. I've never been more so. You and me both. He pressed a kiss between her brows as she stroked her hands down his front, her fingers closing around his belt and looping it undone. He tensed every sweep and scrape of her hands, making him pulse with need. And then she was on to his fly, his arousal straining to meet her, her hand slipping inside as soon as she was able and closing around him. She stroked him once, twice again, her fingers alternating between featherlight and firmly coaxing. He groaned, his jaw clenching tight as he staved off the pleasure-filled heat ripping through him. You need to stop. She smiled, her hair glinting with sunlight as it spread out over the grass. No. She brought her other knee up her free hand, slipping her underwear to the side, while the other slid his swollen head down her slickened wetness, tantalizing him with a hint of her warm, inviting entrance before moving him away again. She was killing him. Move, now, before you lose it, before you waste this precious moment. He had to be inside her when he came. He had to be part of her as she was of him. The bond between them would be sealed. She brought him to her entrance, and in one swift move, he caught hold of her wrist, pulling her hand away and thrusting himself inside hard and deep. God, yes. She cried out beneath him, her yes barely distinguishable from a moan. She was so tight, so wet, so perfect. He buried his head into her shoulder as he stilled, wanting to give her time to adjust, but she shifted impatiently against him. I don't want steady, she rasped against his ear. You won't hurt me, Rafe. This time I won't break. This time we are one. He lost it, giving in to the demands of his body of hers as he rocked into her. He worked his hand between their bodies, wanting to watch as he raised her to heaven before they tipped over the edge together. And oh, how he wanted that even more than he wanted his own completion. He watched the color rise in her cheeks, her lids flicker as he found her circled over her. He had to fight through the haze to give the rhythm he knew would drive her crazy. In this, she hadn't changed. Her pleasure always had the power to bring him to the brink of climax, reaching deeper into his own stores of need than anyone had before or since. Oh, Rafe! She panted, her arms and legs wrapping around him. God, yes! She arched her body, her head going back into the grass. her tension filling the air with her impending climax. She stiffened, the air catching in her lungs, and then she shattered her pleasure-induced waves, racking her body and suffocating him with rippling ecstasy. He held himself hard inside her, his eyes squeezing shut as he joined her, the euphoric sensation filling him mind, body, and soul. And he was hers. He always had been, always would be. I love you, Juli. Her lashes fluttered open, all that he felt reflected back at him in her eyes. I love you too. I never stopped. Josh and Elise's wedding day. The officiant's voice was pleasant and unobtrusive as she performed the wedding ceremony. And Josh and Elise were probably glowing, but Rafe had no idea as he couldn't stop looking at Juli. She looked... His mind stumbled into a wall of inarticulate happiness. She looked like Juli, lovely, radiant, vivid, and so happy his heart ached. Ignoring the calming hand, he pressed against it. The pale peach rose and honeysuckle in her hair glistened from the sudden shower of rain that had sent them all running into the marquee. Her lashes were still spiked with rain, and now, with the tears he knew she would be embarrassed to show. As they'd taken their positions beside Josh and Elise, she'd smiled at him. Her full, exuberant smile that had melted the last of his defenses and left him bare and begging internally. He could barely follow the officiant's words and had no idea how he remembered to hand Josh the ring and do his part. Until the vows. Then he truly listened. But it was Juli that filled his vision, his world. She stood straight and proud across from him, her eyes unveiled everything she was, and felt shining in their depths. He heard the words spoken by the officiant Josh and Elise repeating them. Marriage requires devotion, the ability to listen, the wisdom to know when we are wrong, and the ability to be able to put things right. With his eyes on Juli's, he took those words and set them before her, hoping she could see everything he felt for her, everything he wanted to give her. Will you? Her mouth curved, her eyes full of laughter and love, and her lips shaped themselves around the silent answer. I will. Precisely 1 year later. Do you think Uncle Giovanni approved of our marrying on Valentine's Day in La-di-da, London? I couldn't quite tell from his speech. She laughed as she said it, shaking the snow from her hair. Her decorative pin struggling to hold back the curls as the white flakes fell around her, melting before they hit the parquet floor of his Richmond home. He seemed okay right up until the snowstorm hit. Uncle Giovanni's opinion of English weather isn't high on my list of concerns at the moment, Mrs. Markham. And it was your idea to wait a whole damn year before marrying me. Rafe slid his hands under her coat, and she tipped her head back, still laughing, as she fumbled to take off her gloves and unbutton his coat, all at the same time. 10 years ago, I pledged to marry you on Valentine's Day, and now I have. I've kept my word at last. It's as simple as that. Simple. There was nothing simple about it. It was a damn long, agonizing, heart-crushing eternity, waiting for you to keep your promise. But wasn't it worth it? Every damn long, agonizing, heart-crushing second of those 10 years, and every amazing, heart-thumping, body-sizzling, mind-numbing second of this past year. He pulled her close, just teasing her lips with his, until he felt them warm and soften before straightening so he could appreciate the first step toward the planned seduction of his new wife. Not to mention the embarrassment of every last Edgeware employee gloating over my downfall on the day they see as my own personal Guy Fawkes Day. Well, they will just have to get used to seeing you as less than your perfectly bah-humbug self. You are so lucky I'm stupid in love with you, because that's my only consolation for the fact that now every Valentine's Day in the office is going to be 100 times gooier. But think of what a great excuse you have to be absent from work every Valentine's Day. Now, husband of mine, surely no one would expect you to be there on your wedding anniversary. Julie, you're a genius. I know, my darling Rafe. Aren't you glad you married me? He lifted his hands to pull the pin from her hair, smiling as it tumbled down over her shoulders, and he sank his fingers into the thick warmth of it. A warm purr rumbled through her as she leaned against him, her eyes full of love, full of promise for the future, of a home. They were finally home,